Hey, Michelle, guess what time it is?
What time is it?
It's time for another plant prescription. Are you
Woohoo!
ready to help answer some questions and dig into plant advice for the plant parents of the world out there?
Well, I promise I will do my best.
Excellent. This is episode number 4. I am so excited.
Me too. Really kind of getting on a roll with these things now. Also, it's really fun to see all the questions coming in because I don't get to see these very often. Every now and then one will come my way, but it's really cool to see all of the consumer questions.
It is. So let's jump right in. Our very first question today is from Lindsay in Asheville, North Carolina. She said, "Do I need to water my network Calathea with distilled water?"
Okay, first of all, woohoo, Asheville, North Carolina. That is where I currently am. So shout out to Asheville. Love this place. One thing about this place, though, in regards to water, is that it has the worst quality water I've ever experienced. If you don't live in Asheville, I will tell you all. About every month or so, we get a water boil advisory. It is that bad. And to compensate for these, water boil advisories, I have noticed the water smells like straight chlorine. Um, so yeah, not the best quality water I've ever experienced, but Asheville is awesome. Don't let that discourage you. Now, the good thing though is I personally in Asheville with the questionable Asheville water have just watered my calatheas straight with the tap water. And I've noticed that they are fine. This was like a slow transition for me because I also heard that calatheas needed distilled water. So I didn't immediately water them with, the tap water. It was kind of a progression of me just getting a little bit lazier and a little bit lazier and a little bit lazier. Seriously, though, Justin, have you ever gone to the store to buy your plants distilled water? Because I have done it once and it was a lot of work. Um, and so that was the one and only time. And I like to think that maybe it did something, but slowly over time, I could not do that. I just didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough effort. I love my plants, but maybe I didn't love them like that much to go to the store and get distilled water every week. So I ended up letting my watering can sit out because you and I actually talked about it, and you recommended letting that would like let the chlorine dissipate off. And so I did that for a while, and even that ended up being too much for me to manage. And so in the end, I kind of slowly converted to watering them with tap water, and they seem okay. I don't have every species of Calathea though.
Well, ultimately, there's a couple of issues there with water quality in calatheas. One, chlorine is the one that gets the big bad rap, but fluoride also makes a big difference with a lot of plants, and some plants are more sensitive to fluoride than chlorine.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, fluoride is not a gas, so it will not dissolve out if you let your water sit out overnight.
Mm.
And then more and more municipalities are using a chemical compound called chloramine, which also does not dissolve out. So, it may or may not help to let your water sit out if you find that you have poor water quality. And, like in my mind, this is one of the most ridiculous things to say. But if you do have less than great water, one of the things you can do is you can dilute your tap water with like rainwater or distilled water so that you're bringing the concentration, the amount of chlorine or fluoride down without having to go whole hog and go all the way with distilled.
Man. Well, okay, I have a couple. I want to dig more into this a little bit because I was just kind of reaching from personal experience here. But they make those little fish water conditioners for betta fish. I've had many. I've also killed many. Um, and I wonder if that would also do anything for those chemicals as well. It's interesting to look at, but again, personally, I've kind of just slowly started using tap water and it's been okay. But if you want to love your plants extra, extra, extra hard, then of course, you could use distilled water.
Or rainwater or
I,
melted snow.
I wonder though. I wonder if it could be something else because what I've realized with Calatheas is most of mine tend to throw a temper tantrum if they get dry, even remotely dry, or when the humidity drops too low. And so I wonder if maybe it could also be one of those two things if you're starting to see kind of browning on the edges of your leaves.
That's a great point. And another thing that can cause that, unfortunately, is drafts. If you have it near like an air conditioning or a heating vent, those drafts just don't occur in nature. They can really do a number on thin leaf plants. Happily, in terms of calatheas, like network is on the great end of the spectrum, where it's the most durable of the calatheas that I've grown. It's like the perfect starter calathea.
You know, I I've always kind of been looking for a network. I haven't found one yet, but they are really pretty plants. That's one I don't unfortunately have yet, but I will find one day. Anyway, oh, I have to bring in bugs because I have to. Another thing, if you're seeing like browning on your calatheas, they're super susceptible to spider mites. So look for little webbing, look under the leaves for little flecks. I had to bring in bugs. I couldn't help it, Justin. I just had to.
And if you want to know anything about spider mites, check out episode 3 of our plant podcast, where Michelle goes at length with some great solutions for dealing with spider mites, as well as making sure that you can identify that that's actually the pest, because it's never a good idea to treat something if you don't know that's for sure what it is.
Right. Yep. Agree.
All right, second question is from Linda in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So Linda brought her little fiddle fig out to the deck to water it, left it out in the sun all day, and now the leaves look kind of tan. She wants to know what to do. And I think this is probably a situation that we've all been in, where we've had a plant that's not been in direct sun, and then it's been in direct sun either because we left it somewhere, or well, most time it's because I left it somewhere. That it shouldn't be. And then so Linda, what you're seeing is sunburn. The good news is that sunburn is cosmetic. The bad news is that, unlike people, it's not going to heal over. So that damage to the leaves is permanent. The best you can do is give it good care and wait for it to put out new growth, so you don't see the new damaged growth anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, those leaves are toast. Ha ha. No, nobody. I would, we're gonna have to talk to our editor here and see if we could add crickets and like little sound effects because I thought that was a whammy, but I guess not. Anyway, I wholeheartedly agree. I was pretty much gonna say the same thing as you, Justin. Now, my question though is, if you were going to rehab a plant that did get sunburn, how would you do that? Would you leave it out in the sun, or would you kind of transition it back, or would you put it back inside? Or what would you do?
So if it was just outside for an afternoon or something, it's not really an issue of acclimation, so you don't need to transition it back. It didn't have a chance to get used to being in the sun. It just suffered the shock. But if you've had it outside for a few weeks and you want to move it back in, then yeah, transitioning will definitely decrease the amount of stress.
Okay, yeah. I've burned a couple, and I normally what I do is if it's like the beginning of the summer, I'll leave it out there because I want it to acclimate to that. But if I'm just putting it out there temporarily, I'll move it into shade immediately. I've burned a few, and
I think we all have.
yeah,
It's
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 a
part
rite
of
of
being a plant
passage.
parent.
Yep,
Exactly.
definitely a rite of passage. So congratulations, you're past that rite of passage, Linda. Woo!
All right, should we move on to our third question?
Let's do it.
This comes from Yakima, Washington. Jerry asks, "How do I get my peace lily to bloom? I've had it for 6 months and it hasn't produced a single flower."
Ooh. Uh, hmm. I'm gonna throw something out there and then I want to hear what you think, Justin.
Okay.
Because I've honestly had some issues getting my peace lilies to bloom as well. But I have noticed when I put them outside in the summer, not in full sun. We just reviewed that. Do not put them in full sun. Don't burn them. But if you haven't gone through the rite of passage, it is a rite of passage. So I would put them outside in full shade, or dappled sunlight, like the light coming through trees, maybe. And I guess I would fertilize, because I've noticed in the summer when I put them out, that's really the time I get flowers. And I like to think it's that kind of that higher light with the full spectrum in it is contributing to that. And always fertilizer is going to help your plant kind of grow and be a successful plant. But what do you think, Justin?
Yeah, you went exactly where I did.
Yeah.
And light with peace lily in particular is one of those things where the we just don't have enough room to be able to talk about it on a plant tag. So peace lilies will tolerate low light, and you'll see some growers put low light on the tag because they'll survive there. But that doesn't necessarily mean they'll thrive, and they'll definitely not bloom in low light. So the more light that you can give it, the more fuel it's going to have, the more energy it's going to have to be able to bloom. And that light can be natural, artificial, or a mix of both. So, if you have a dark house or an apartment, Jerry, just getting like a little LED light to put next to it may help do wonders. The
Hmm.
second thing, like Michelle said, if you've had it in the same pot for a while and you've never fertilized, giving it a dose of just any general purpose houseplant fertilizer may help. Again, a plant can survive without it, but getting to the point where it blooms and thrives, it may need a little more help, a little more love from you. So try the fertilizer. And then also, if it's an older plant, check to see if it's root bound. Peace lilies
Hmm.
hold up to being root bound really well, but just like the point with tolerating low light, they tolerate being root bound, but that may inhibit them from blooming as well. Um, moving it to a bigger pot if you're seeing just masses and masses of roots when you slip it out may help it flourish a little bit more.
Yeah, you make a really good point with the roots. I've had a couple of peace lilies, bring it out, I try to repot it, and this thing is like a monster on the bottom. And you can make a couple of peace lilies from that one if you're daring enough to chop it into pieces, which is what I've done a couple of times. Or you could just get a really, really big pot.
So hope that helps, Jerry.
Yeah, I hope so. Peace lily flowers are really beautiful. So fingers crossed. Just be careful not to burn it.
Yeah, if in doubt, it's usually easier not to put it outside and to give more light inside.
Hmm.
But if you feel confident that you can keep it from any kind of direct sun outside, then it might be worth a shaded porch or under a big tree, where it'll get some protection.
All right, Justin. So does that mean it's common misconception time?
All right, let's bust a myth, Michelle.
Bust a myth. Anyway, what's our misconception today?
All right, so we get a number of questions from people asking, how dare you ship plants infested with bug eggs in the soil? I see all of these gray eggs when I squish them, squishy stuff comes out. And I absolutely see where they're coming from. On first glance, these definitely do look like they could be some sort of egg. They're the right size and shape. But what are they, Michelle?
Well, I would say most likely they're fertilizer prills. Uh, and it's really comical to me that they're being squished because yes, inside of there it would kind of be squishy. These are slow release fertilizer prills. They can either be applied to the top of the soil, like a top dress, or they could be incorporated in our soil. We have such a massive farm. We're talking, 2,000 acres. I
In
don't
total,
know.
we're about five now.
Five. Okay. So giant, giant farm. And it's not really sustainable and possible to go and liquid feed, like mix up fertilizer and drench that into all the pots. And so, oftentimes, to get fertilizer to the plants, we'll incorporate little fertilizer granules. These are slow release. There's varying amounts of time. It can be 2 to 3 months, it can be 8 to 9, so on and so forth, even longer than that. And that is how long they will release fertilizer for. And so we use these a lot to kind of, cut down on the need to go drench or fertilizer, also to just have fertilizer in our sprinkler system, wasting getting on the ground. It's a lot more economical and sustainable to put these in. And they are not bug eggs.
Michelle,
Sometimes, go ahead.
what advice would you give somebody to try to determine the difference between a prill and an egg?
Well, April most of the time from what I've seen is like perfectly round. And honestly, it's kind of large. It's about the size of a pea most of the time from what I've seen. They can range in size. I've seen them from like a dark green color. They can get translucent as well, and that definitely looks a little eggy for lack of a better term. Um, but honestly, squishing them, if you squish it, it pops and there's just water inside. Most of the eggs that you would probably see in the soil are very tiny. And you most of the time probably won't see giant eggs like that, especially perfectly round, hard shelled eggs like that in the soil. But I mean, honestly, when in doubt, just email us photos and we'll kind of bust another myth or bust another misconception. That's a horrible sound. We need somebody with talent, musical talent, to put, put a segment in for that. Also, it's not always a bug. I mean, and if it is, it's not bad that it's a bug. Some bugs are good. Circling back to the previous episode, not all bugs are bad, and it's not always a bug. People are so quick to just point the finger and say it's a bug, and therefore it must die. People, we really need to change that. We're gonna get there, and we're gonna get there together. Anyway,
Michelle can be the face of beneficial bugs for all of the plant parents in America.
I just had this image of like, these giant eyes, like antenna and the mandibles when you said the face of bugs. And
That's your Halloween costume.
Justin, don't give it away. It's a big competition at Costa.
You're the one who's recording this.
Okay, all right. On past that now. Is that it? Is that all we got for today? Because I gotta go quickly change my Halloween costume and think of something new here.
I have a plant update if we want to revisit that.
Oh yes, of course.
Okay. So, Michelle, you know how I'm totally into passion flowers?
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's a little bit crazy.
Uh,
That's why Michelle laughs. So I have been working on hybridizing, and one of the seeds that so it was a seed that I would have produced fall of 2019, um, has been growing, and it has buds on it now. So
oh.
I'm really excited that like 2.5 years of, from the time that I first pollinated the flower, I'm going to get to see what the flower looks like of this new hybrid in, I'm guessing maybe a week or so.
Oh wow. 2.5 years in the making.
I
That's
know, I
incredible.
know. And with my luck, it's going to be something completely plain and like, but it's still mine.
Doesn't
Um,
matter. You get to name it.
so that's the fun thing about hybridizing is that it's all just this big genetic roll of the dice.
Mhm.
It could look like either one of its parents, it could look like halfway between its parents, or it could look nothing like either of its parents, depending on what traits, are buried back within both of its seed parent and its pollen parents' backgrounds, and so I'm excited.
I just have this vision, talking about how it could look like its parents or not, of going on what is it? Where they find out who's the father. What show is that again?
I think that was like all of the daytime talk shows of the
Yes.
90s.
I just like see these flowers opening and you'd be like, "Oh, so and so is not the father." And then the little passiflora in the corner is like dancing its leaves like, "Ah." Okay. Oh man, more. I don't know. It's gonna drive me crazy. I gotta watch more of that TV. Anyway, yeah, so that's really cool though, Justin. And also, let's not forget the fact that you do get to name it. And there have been so many fun names in the plant industry. Remember when we were working in the trial garden, there was was it Perilla Magilla?
Yes. And
That one just
Chlorella
like,
Magilla Vanilla.
oh my gosh. My favorite though, I think we can all agree on this, is Begonia Hairy Thing. If you can imagine, there's a lot of hair. It's very fuzzy begonia. And somebody, a lucky geneticist who bred this plant, got to name it. Or unfortunately, it was probably more or less the marketing team that got to name it. But they called it Hairy Thing, which I think is just the coolest thing in the world. Because, yeah, I mean, it makes me want to buy the plant just for the name. So no
Yeah,
pressure, Justin.
you can kind of tell which plant breeders have marketing teams they work with. And, the plant breeders name it versus the marketing team names it.
Yes. Yeah, because otherwise it would just be, begonia 76590.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's very sweet when they name it like after family members,
Oh,
but
I
it
didn't know
tells you
any better.
nothing about the plant whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
begonia, Michelle. I,
Aw.
you know, I can't tell you anything about what that begonia would look like.
Well, I can based on the name. It's full of energy. It's going to be a great performer. It's going to grow for you really good. It's going to be, colorful and probably just the best begonia you've ever had, just based on the name alone. I'm not being biased or anything. Anyway, no pressure, Justin. If you want, I will happily brainstorm some fun little names once you see what the flowers look like.
Absolutely. I'll be sure to text you.
Awesome.
And everybody, thank you for joining in. I think that's a wrap on episode 4. Today's episode was brought to you by Network Calathea. Network is renowned for being the most tolerant of Calathea varieties, so named because it has dark green veins over a light green leaf that makes it look almost like a digital network out of the Matrix. If you're like Michelle, you definitely need one for your collection. Look for it
Mm.
at your favorite retailer today. Bye, everybody. We'll talk to you again next week.
Adios.